Hello, it is iFish. Today I will be submitting my hybrid A-1 Basilisk for the Great Hybrid Tournament. The original Greek descriptions of the basilisk are of a small serpent creature, about 12 inches long, with a white crown, and its breath is so toxic that it kills even the plants around it. Later depictions made it rooster-like in appearance, making it synonymous with the cockatrice, and in more modern media, it is generally a large lizard or snake-like monster. History lesson aside, the basis of the basilisk will be Yaksha perettii, a type of salamander-like amphibian from the Cretaceous period. Yaksha and their relatives were a bit odd for amphibians possessing scales. Not virgin reptile scales, but these scales are derived from fish scales, and if that wasn't good enough, those scales were also present on the skull, which is actually fairly uncommon in fish. Typically most of the skull is dermal bone, derived from scales similar to the scapula and teeth. Now this isn't the only interesting trait of the Yaksha, well, the Albania patentidae in general. Albania patentidae most likely lacked lungs similar to lungless salamanders. This is thought because their skull anatomy had traits seen in animals like chameleons, and lungless salamanders with a ballistic tongue, making breathing difficult through buccal pumping. This means that they absorbed oxygen through their skin, and they would have had mucus coatings as seen in other amphibians. All this said, why Yaksha perettii specifically, despite larger species in the group? The answer is fairly boring. Yaksha is only about 2 inches long from head to hip. It is one of the more well-studied species. This is mainly because there is a specimen trapped in amber, rather than only fossils. Lifestyle-wise, scientists are fairly confident these animals were arboreal with lizard-like keratin claws and a behavior similar to chameleons today. The next contributor up is Purrosaurus brasiliensis. I don't think I need to introduce this one too much, but in short, it is one of, if not the largest, of the crocodilomorpha to exist, having all the typical crocodilian traits, with a robust body, and a generalist diet, hunting megafauna, including but not limited to other crocodilians, giant turtles, and ground sloths. On top of all this, it is also thought to have been capable of the crocodile death roll. Now I will note that the amount I am taking from the Purrosaurus made it a pretty strong pick for my base. But I think Yaksha is more based. Anyways, I will be taking much of the Purrosaurus's anatomy, particularly in the skull. Taking nearly all the skull anatomy. Granted, crocodilians including the Purrosaurus actually have fairly flat skulls with smaller attachment areas for the temporal muscles. However, the Yaksha's skull was taller, and if we combine the two, the skull itself is a bit taller, similar to theropods, meaning the bite force is actually proportionally higher than a Purrosaurus. This should be fine, as well as the Purrosaurus bite force is rated for something exceeding even tyrannosaurs, and as you decrease a structure in size when scaling, it grows in proportional strength, so the skull is more than capable of handling this. Other traits being taken from the Purrosaurus are large parts of the postcranial anatomy, especially in the legs and ribs. Purrosaurus had more pillar erect legs compared to amphibians, allowing for greater speed, and their overall frame is more robust when considering things like an rounded rib cage that many amphibians lack to protect the organs. These ribs are necessary for the next part, taking the lungs of a Purrosaurus. This is to increase breathing efficiency as I scale the base up larger and to support a more heavily muscular animal. Typically amphibians do not have muscles in the ribs to operate the lungs, instead using the mouth to force air in. This is why lungless salamanders lack lungs while chameleons can keep them with ballistic tongues. The Purrosaurus will also contribute to internal elements, including a 4-chambered heart and many portions of the brain, specifically portions that influence hunting behavior and control of these internal organs. The idea is to make this animal hunt more like traditional reptiles, frogs, and salamanders, acting as a typical ambush predator, lying in wait and lunging for a bite rather than trying to use the tongue, which I will be replacing with that of the Purrosaurus. Some might think this is a loss. And it is for hunting smaller insects. But crocodiles' tongues are built in a way so they don't accidentally bite their tongues. The animal will be perfectly adept at hunting insects anyways. And last but not least, I will be utilizing some elements of their osteoderms. Crocodilians use what's called metaplastic ossification, meaning they turn their skin into bone rather than the mammalian method of directly putting bone into the skin without the middleman. This actually works in my favor when working with fish like scales because the scales are embedded in the dermis, and if we use this type of osteoderm growth, the surrounding tissue becomes ossified, making the scales embedded in the osteoderm. Now, this kills flexibility, so it will exclusively be used on areas with long, inflexible elements like long arm bones or the skull, leaving regions like the tail without this. Also, note that this is different from crocodile scales, that are located on the epidermis, and yes, they are usually taken together, but in this case, they are not. Almost forgot, the final trait from the Purrosaurus is elements of its stomach mucus lining utilized in the skin mucus secretion. This is to allow for stronger acid resistance. I don't intend to mess up the consistency of the mucus too much, and don't intend to go all in resisting strong acids with a pH of 1. However, we'll be using enough elements here to at least tolerate pH of about 3 or higher. This is mainly done by a higher level of bicarbonates. To go with this, I will also take some of the genes responsible for producing stomach acid, to use later in tandem with another contributor. With those two long ones done, most of the other animals are pretty simple, hopefully. So the longhorn cowfish is possibly one of the single best fish species to use effectively for scales. Firstly, for their proportional thickness, they are among the thickest, have exceptional collagen microstructures for load distribution, and if you have the ability to use them as ridged armor, they have one of the best shapes. Unfortunately, I do need some flexibility, but will use hexagonal armor shape stencilly interlocked wherever I can fit it. Again, like the Purrosaurus, localized to areas like the long bones of legs and the skull. One might ask, how does one use fish scales on a tetrapod? I understand that most people probably didn't watch my last hybrid video, but to keep this explanation short, my base has scales of a fish. Many extinct amphibian groups actually possessed fish scales in some capacity, and they solved the issue of drying out, with having mucus-coated skin. Also, do note while the scales on the body are not as intensive as on regions as for example the head, they have roughly the same coverage of Yaksha, with each scale retaining more of the shape seen in Yaksha. However, individual scales are a bit larger, thicker, and slightly less numerous to compensate for their larger size. I can also mention that longhorn cowfish are actually poisonous. Unfortunately, their poison is specialized for other fish and not effective on invertebrates, or tetrapods, and the tetrodotoxin application is poor, so I will not be using these from the cowfish. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I will introduce everyone's favorite fish. The mola, or more commonly, the ocean sunfish. Believe it or not, this is actually one of the stronger picks on the hybrid, and you might think I'm crazy. But I am using the sunfish for its scales. And yes, adult sunfish lack scales, this is true. However, their larvae do have scales, fish scales specifically. These scales are reabsorbed as the animal goes through its metamorphosis, but that's the cool part about genetic engineering. I don't need to take the gene that reabsorbs the scales as the sunfish grows. All I want is to grow them, and these scales are special. Let me tell you, sunfish larvae have scales that are hexagonal pyramids, with serrated edges. You wouldn't know by looking, but the sunfish are actually pretty close in relation to boxfish, like the longhorn cowfish, as well as pufferfish. Anyways, I will be using the sunfish to modify the scales further on the hybrid. Granted, the pyramids will not be as large as the sunfish larvae, but they will be raised just where the tip pierces the epidermis, like small thorns on a branch. The spines would be slightly longer on the top of the skull, back, tail and outside of the legs. The underbelly ones would not pierce the epidermis, but still be present under the skin. All this means anything trying to bite, or otherwise attack this animal, would be hard-pressed not to cut themselves. On top of having thick, and extremely durable armor to work through, probably, one of the least critical contributors, is the mossy leaf-tailed gecko. I say non-critical because technically, I could remove it and my fighting ability is unaffected. However, that is discounting an important element of this competition, being that these animals encounter each other in environments. If for example the basilisk is just hanging out vibing, there is a real possibility of some cluck-ass bird dive bombing me and breaking my spine instantly. Could that even happen at 100 grams with my armor? Probably not, but I don't want to be caught lacking. Anyways, the leaf-tailed gecko mostly solves that, giving more wrinkled skin that obscures the silhouette, and eliminates the shadow. In terms of camouflage, it's only really beat out by a few animals, like cephalopods. Because this camo happens in the epidermis, the armor should not interfere. Some spines do poke through, but, due to the nature of this camouflage, the spines shouldn't reduce it, and if anything would help. A cool thing a lot of people might not know, is that this type of gecko is also one of the few reptiles that can change color, and actually use that to hide. It's mostly just limited to shades of green, and brown, but that's exactly what's needed. Finally, I also will take contributions from the eyes, and necessary brain equipment to utilize them. Gecko eyes have potentially some of the best pupil shapes you can get. They are great for ambush predators, and can function both night and day. Granted, I am taking the eyes, but not their eyelid structure. That part is actually taken from the Purrosaurus, with the eyelids and nictitating membrane to moisten, to avoid cleaning problems. Now you may be wondering, why I have named my hybrid the Basilisk, and for good reason. None of the contributors so far have been used for poison. That changes here. All remaining 7 contributors will be utilized for poisons. Why? Because I thought it was funny. Starting off, is the European fire salamander. I will primarily be taking the large parotid glands, located right behind the head. They are capable of spraying a few feet, accurately into animals' eyes, and mouths. Fire salamanders also have granular glands, along their back and part of their tail to coat their body in toxin. Fire salamanders do have a decent toxin of their own. Well, toxins. Out of the toxic chemicals, I will be taking salamandrine as the main one. Some others may also be taken. Some of their toxins also have antibacterial properties. Those are to be kept to a minimum. The toxicity is anywhere from 20 mg per kilogram in frogs to 1 mg per kilogram in rabbits. Unfortunately, I don't have great info on how it kills, but it attacks the central nervous system, causing respiratory paralysis, with effects happening in the minutes range. I don't think this toxin is effective on invertebrates, but could be wrong, and the only real animals I know of that are highly resistant are grass snakes and fire salamanders. I don't think I need to say this, but I will anyway. I will be adding minor elements of behavior from the salamander and the next contributor to properly utilize their tools, although these would be mostly as a defensive measure. Most normal people would be good with that for toxin delivery, but I have a really funny idea for later, so I am not satisfied. So I am adding in the golden spiny-tailed gecko. First of all, as a more active predators than leaf-tailed geckos, they are more adept climbers and jumpers, so they will contribute a bit to the overall leg structure and the feet pads. Granted, the Yaksha does already provide claws, but this is fine. Outside of this though, and more importantly, spiny-tailed geckos can spray a foul-smelling fluid from glands in their tails at predators. This spray will actually be replaced with hydrochloric acid, produced through genes from my crocodilian friend, from earlier, not fully concentrated mind you, at about a pH of 3, about on the weaker side of formic acid space. This will be important in a moment. So this is probably my favorite element of the hybrid, and why I called it the basilisk in the first place. I will be utilizing the aromatic cherry millipede. This is the first and only invertebrate in the genome, but it's probably one of the most critical genomes. Cherry millipedes are one of the only animals that can produce hydrogen cyanide, a nasty chemical that is small enough to bypass cell membranes, and directly attacks the mitochondria, shutting down the powerhouse of the cell. Normally, cyanide is pretty bad, but when mixed with an acid, it turns into a gas very quickly. Stronger the acid, the faster the change, although pH 3 is more than enough to get the job done. I will be producing cyanide within the parotid and granular glands, meaning if any acid gets on the basilisk, or you are sprayed by both the tail and parotid glands, a cloud of cyanide gas will form, taking effect in seconds for anything that breathes. One may also ask how I avoid this myself, and great question, but the millipede solves that too, with modified parts of their own mitochondria that reject binding of cyanide, making them essentially immune. Additionally, in their own body fluids, they have enzymes that can prevent cyanide damage. For anyone curious, cyanide gas is extremely toxic, killing at 1 to 3 milligrams per kilogram, effective on anything with mitochondria, taking effect in seconds, causing dizziness, weakness, vertigo, confusion, cardiac arrest, seizures, coma, etc. Though, for anything that produces cyanide, it is probably safe to assume is largely resistant or basically immune. The next two contributors are two golden frogs, being the golden poison frog, and their Panamanian golden frog. Well, the Panamanian golden frog is a toad, but toads are frogs. Anyways, both these species sequester alkaloids that they eat, the poison frog being the more famous of the two. Sequestering batrachotoxin, a small neurotoxin about 1 nanometer in size, killing mice at about 2 to 5 micrograms per kilogram when ingested. It attacks the voltage-gated sodium channels on neurotoxin receptor site 2, forcing them in an open state, causing convulsive seizures, flaccid paralysis, loss of balance, heart and lung failure. Overall pretty solid toxin, with only a few animals like corsine beetles, some frogs in the genus Phyllobates, hooded pitahue, and blue captifrita being immune. Honestly, I probably wouldn't have used this offensively because I don't like using toxins not produced locally. But I saw a few hybrids using this toxin and decided it would be worth getting the immunity. However, the main issue with using this is how it targets sodium channels. If I use this in conjunction with toxins like tetrodotoxin or saxitoxin, I would actually be reducing lethality, so I will only use the frog for immunity to its own poison. The Panamanian golden frog is a bit different though. They contain 3 toxins. One is derived from an alkaloid diet like the poison frog, although they modify these alkaloids in their body into zatechotoxin AB, a chemical almost identical in function and target to saxitoxin, but it is 60 to 600 times more potent. It acts targeting voltage-gated sodium channels, binding to the extracellular pore-forming region, receptor site 1, forcing it closed. This is the same thing that tetrodotoxin does. However, it has a stronger affinity, and therefore higher lethality, about 11 micrograms per kilogram. It is about 1.5 nanometers on the larger end, with symptoms occurring in 20 to 30 minutes including numbness, nausea, paralysis, loss of balance, hypertension, and yes, this is actually less lethal than batrachotoxin. But I dislike poison frogs. I should mention, zatechotoxin AB behaves pretty much identically to tetrodotoxin and saxitoxin, meaning an animal immune to either is likely immune to zatechotoxin AB. Anyways, Panamanian golden frogs have 2 other poisons, one being tetrodotoxin. Although they do not produce it on their own, this is most likely done by a symbiotic bacteria, because it takes years for tetrodotoxin toxicity to fade. Once in captivity, I will be taking elements from the Panamanian frogs, to help grow this bacteria, on the skin. These bacteria shouldn't be affected by the cyanide, because they lack mitochondria. Finally, Panamanian golden frogs have a toxin they actually produce. They are toads, part of the same group as cane toads. They produce buffer-dienolides, about 1 to 2 nanometers at their widest, and work by blocking sodium-potassium pumps, causing sodium spikes, leading to things like increased heart rate, cause dizziness, nausea, and weakness. It also in later stages slows the heart rate. Symptoms typically occur about half an hour in. The later chemicals used will accelerate this, not to mention these symptom times are for larger animals like humans. It should finally be noted that all of these toxins are lethal to invertebrates, as well as vertebrates, at least ones with nerves. If someone made something without nerves, or mitochondria, well-played. In my research, the oriental fire-bellied toad had very interesting chemicals. First, I will mention bomosine, a fast-acting neuropeptide that normally helps regulate appetite in vertebrates, and due to its similarity with chemicals bugs use for the same task, it may have similar effects, causing subjects to feel full. Now, I know kinda weird to use. However, consider that these fights likely will be predation events. If the basilisk is attacked by a fast animal that loses its appetite, it may retreat, and well, if most anything gets toxins from the basilisk, they are on borrowed time. The second, and more important, chemical that the red-bellied toad produce, is called beta-gamma-cat. Is a protein that rips holes in cell membranes about 1.5 to 2 nanometers wide, or in other words large enough for every toxin being used to pass through. Normally this toxin is lethal on its own, ripping holes in cells that allow water to flow in, causing them to burst, but this can be co-opted into an accelerant. Last, but certainly not least, I am adding the Colorado river toad. For one, they have a wide head, so I can increase bite force a little bit by integrating that into the skull anatomy. I can also modify the legs a bit, to increase lunging power, not to mention the larger parotid glands, but I didn't add it for that. No, the toad has some of the fastest acting, and most potent, hallucinogenic poison in the animal kingdom. Within seconds, be you spider, snail, beetle, bird, fish, or mammal, you will see God, and with the other toxins in a few minutes, you will go meet him. Oh, and I cannot forget, I will use the toad to scale the basilisk's size to 100 grams, making it in line with the size of hatchling saltwater crocodiles, and Komodo dragons, being about 12 inches long. The basilisk weighs exactly 100 grams, and comes in at precisely 30 centimeters long through precise growth control. This specimen should not experience any further growth, being as large as allowable for this competition. The basilisk, despite having weaponry made for attrition, is not built for extended engagements, as a cold-blooded predator. Despite this, it can reach high speeds, albeit difficult to measure due to the size. It can outclass most animals in vertical and upside-down movement. On an open field it is likely outclassed by more specialized runners. Its true speed comes from a leaping ability, in optimal conditions, allowing it to clear a meter in distance as it lunges. Like a crocodile mixed with a gecko, the basilisk prefers to attack from above when possible. In water it is capable of swimming, but it is nothing to write home about. No better than most lizards, although it is still quite capable of resting underwater, breathing through its skin, and lunging out of water. The basilisk's bite force is incredible for its size, relying mostly on a crocodilian architecture, stretched both dorsally and laterally, increasing the already strong performance, combined with death rolling. This can kill, and break through most armor, potentially even cracking shells, that of titan beetles, though anything thicker, is unrealistic excluding ripping off legs. The main tool here, is the toxic saliva, containing beta-gamma cat, 5-MeO-DMT, and phytoxin. All three of these toxins are lethal in high doses to most organisms on their own, but the main reason only three are present in the saliva, is the basilisk has a high tolerance for all its poison, but it could likely not handle a steady stream of some of those poisons, ingested, throughout its life. A few others are also limited to skin secretions, due to their nature or production. The main build of the basilisk, is not offense, but instead defense, relying on hard scales to buy it a few seconds, to minutes, for the toxic chemicals to take effect, through a combined spray of hydrogen cyanide, samandarine, zatekitoxin AB, tetrodotoxin, bufadienolides, bomacin, beta-gamma cat, 5-MeO-DMT, and phytoxin. Concentration-wise, the spray is primarily hydrogen cyanide, with the next highest concentrations being beta-gamma cat, 5-MeO-DMT, and phytoxin, followed by the neurotoxins. If an animal is hit by this, they have anywhere from a few minutes to hours to live. If gas gets into the respiratory system, or if a hybrid is sprayed in the face, or in an open wound, they would have seconds before things kick into gear. If the spray only gets on the skin, depending on the skin type, they might be okay, and toxins may take a few hours to take full effect, but there is still a high chance of mortality. One may wonder how much poison the basilisk carries. It is about 80 milligrams of toxic chemicals in the parotid glands alone, or enough poison to kill anywhere from 2,000 to 20,000 mice and give an elephant an extremely bad day. Finally, I'm gonna bring this up. Cyanide gas is flammable, and has a flash point in the negatives, but something like a bombardier beetle's spray does not reach the combustion temp. If something did, both animals will have major problems. Although, because the cyanide mixes with acid away from the basilisk's body, hopefully it will be fine. Now, as much as I'd rather not, I am gonna deploy Insectoray. As much as I like the other environments, the basilisk is kinda optimized as a tropical arboreal ambush hunter. Sure, its camouflage probably could work in the mangroves, or the grassland, but it's best suited for dense lush vegetation. Additionally, as an amphibian it likes to be nearish to water, and isn't really built otherwise. The basilisk should be plenty able to hunt most prey its size, considering it uses a lot of Purrosaurus hardware, suited for larger armored prey items. Anyways, I think that's it. Have a great day and good luck.